How do crossbred cattle provide marketing flexibility?
Well, I think most people that feed cattle really like feeding crossbred cattle, especially if they have a black hide. So it gives them the best of both worlds. They get the benefits of heterosis with the feed conversion and efficiency and the survivability, but then they also have a calf that can go CAB and add that, $60 to $90 a head premium. On the female side, then, if you choose to develop your heifers or even sell them as weaned replacements, if you got a black-hided crossbred heifer, they are absolutely in demand.
And just what does a famine in Sweden have to do with bull development?
In the Överkalix district, if a family's boys went through a time of famine right before they were going to go through puberty and during puberty, their children and grandchildren lived exceptionally long and healthy lives with no infertility, no records of what we now know to be autoimmune diseases or diabetes or heart disease, cancer, and they outlived the average by, I'd be lying if I made up a number, but it was significant, a number of years. And what was more interesting is that the inverse of that was also true. If a family was experiencing a time of plenty and their boys were, on the chubby side, I guess, to be not so politically correct, while they were about to go through puberty and during puberty, their children were kind of riddled with health issues and had earlier mortality than the average.
All that and more on this episode 489 of the Working Cows podcast, brought to you by the Wineglass Ranch.
Welcome to the podcast that gives producers a platform to discuss and share paradigm-challenging practices. Practices that have increased the effectiveness of their operation and the joy that their families have received from this lifestyle.
Howdy, everybody. It's Clay Connery, host of the Working Cows podcast. Very excited to be joined today by Mason Lautenschlager. Mason is a guy who's been on a journey of developing a composite breed of cattle, and they've got a bull sale coming up in first week in February. So if you want to check that out, you can go find them on DV Auction, or there'll be links in the show notes page today to their Facebook page, and there's videos up there that you can see the bulls that we're going to be talking about today. But we're going to talk to him today about how he's gone about developing this crossbred breed, what breeds he's selected and why, and kind of the way that they've seen the impact of this journey, what impact it has had on their livestock. So very excited to share with you this conversation with Mason Lautenschlager. Mason, thanks for joining me today on the Working Cows podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm always interested to talk to people who are doing different things, obviously, in agriculture, genetics especially. And so what you guys are doing there of developing a composite, I guess I'd like to kind of get an understanding of what were your motivations in starting that process? Kind of how did you get started, and what were the motivations?
Not unique to people in our circle. I kind of had my back against the wall and needed things to change. Had cows that were way too big and taking too many inputs and needed to be more efficient for us. We wanted to start to expect more out of our cows, and with that, we knew that fertility might be something that was compromised. So we looked at, well, what's our most cost-effective way to improve fertility and longevity, recognizing that that's one of the most economically relevant traits there is. And heterosis was kind of the answer that we found. We were doing some crossbreeding at that time between Angus and Simmental, and that's a really good first-generation cross, especially if you can, within the sort of grass-centric world, if you can find the right Simmental genetics, which can be a challenge, but they're out there. That's a good cross. But as you get to the second and third generation, you lose some of that heterosis and you get some parental types, meaning some cattle that are more Angus in appearance and phenotype, and some that are more like a purebred Simmental. And like I said, those cattle are a little less likely to work in our system, but they can. And so we stumbled across some data from the Meat Animal Research Center in Clay Center, Nebraska, where if you have more than two breeds in a composite, you can more easily maintain that heterosis generation over generation. And so we looked to incorporate Hereford right away, and we did that. And we wanted a fourth breed to use. And I grew up around some Gelbvieh cattle. My mom's brother was a registered Gelbvieh breeder when I was a child, and those were really modest sized cows and nice udders, and it seemed like they stuck around forever. And then when I got to kind of researching more about Gelbviehs, the age at puberty, and I mean, gosh, you want to talk about a cow that can bring in a big percentage of her body weight. Gelbviehs are near the top of that list, and modest mature size. And I don't know what their butter fat is in their milk, but man, do they raise a big calf. And so we included them in the composite as well, and try to keep things homozygous black and polled so that the convenience are there and the marketing flexibility is there. I actually really like red cattle, but the market kind of demands right now that we try to have a black hide on them.
Just to recap, where are you now? What are kind of the breeds that are present in the composite?
The four primary breeds that we have are Angus, Simmental, Hereford, and Gelbvieh. And we have some composites that are just Simmental, Angus, and Gelbvieh. We have some that are all four breeds. And then we still sell some Sim Angus bulls. And those are mostly a byproduct of our replacement program. We try to keep some Sim Angus cows coming back in that we can use our Hereford Gelbvieh composite bulls on. It's tough to cut some of those bull calves, though, when they kind of fit the ticket from everything that we're trying to develop. So we do still have a few of those Simmental Angus hybrid bulls as well.
What percentage of the herd are kind of, maybe break it down for me as far as, are there some of those, are there some cows out there that are all for getting bred to bulls that are all for, or is it more to, the Sim Angus cross and the Gelbvieh Hereford cross being bred to each other? How does that work out?
Right now, about 40% of it's composites, being bred to composites. And those are mostly our own bulls that we've raised that are going back over those. There's about 10% of the cow herd that's a composite between Simmental and Hereford. And we breed those to a couple of balancer bulls that we've tried and really had some success making really nice daughters with. And then about half of the cow herd is Simmental Angus cross that we'll breed to our own bulls that we developed that are a composite between Gelbvieh and Hereford. So we had to make the parent breeds in a couple of these cases, which has taken some time.
What do you mean by that, make the parent breeds?
Well, there's only one place in the country I know of that you can go buy a Gelbvieh Hereford composite bull. So we had to kind of make those ourselves to use the genetics that we wanted. It's nothing against the outfit that does sell them. I've had a number of conversations with the guy. He's a great guy. Just was a little different direction genetically than what we wanted to use. And then the Simmental Hereford cross cows, we made those as well, just so we had something to use balancer bulls on to try to keep enough variety, I guess, in the gene pool, avoid having inbreds. So we've kind of done that now to where the future is we'll mostly be using our own bulls on our own composite cows and just using our own genetics.
Sure. So when my dad started running Simmentals, they were red and splotchy.
Yep.
And now the people I'm aware of that run Simmentals are basically Angus, maybe with a white spot here or there. Is that the kind of Simmental you guys have? Is the more black-hided Simmentals?
Yeah, most of them are solid black. There's a couple that are solid red. I would say the differences are more compositional than hide color and whatnot. They're going to tend to be a little bit more heavy muscled. Angus is now, as a national average, the biggest cow in the country. I know there's a lot of genetics still popular in the listeners here that would defy that, but as a national average, Angus is now the biggest cow. So I can say that the Simmental cows are probably a little bit smaller than the Angus cows mainstream. But
in the words of a certain bull breeder, the Angus have out Simmentaled the Simmental.
Was that Bart? That sounds like something Bart would say.
It was actually Kit Farrow, but
oh, okay. Bart,
but it's true.
Bart Carmichael is somebody I look up to quite a bit, and that's something I could see him saying.
Yeah. You're right. It is something that I could see him saying as well. So, I interrupted you there. I don't know if you had more you were angling towards there.
Well, I kind of lost my train of thought a little bit, but on the Simmental side of things, it's been kind of funny because we've been kind of bound and determined to decrease our cow size and increase fleshing ability. And as a rule, we've done that, but we weigh the cows every year, and the thing that keeps throwing off the averages is there's a bunch of those 8 to 12-year-old Simmental cows that are still kind of high performance oriented from before we sort of had our awakening moment, I guess. I'm not sure what else to refer to it as, but they refuse to leave, which is kind of a good problem, and that we've really started to challenge them in different ways reproductively and grazing more months out of the year all the time. But I guess that means that they're passing on some good genetics for fertility and longevity, even if we have to be careful on how we made them for the mature size and the fleshing ability and things like that.
So the awakening moment is the back against the wall needing some things to change. Is that right?
Yep.
Okay. And
Go
when
ahead.
was that?
That was in the winter of 2016 and 2017. It was a pretty terrible winter for us. I'd been dating my now wife for about a year at that time. And man, was she a trooper to stick around through that first year, because I was absolutely doing things the hard way, realizing that things needed to change. And then we had a terrible winter. I was upside down on the last 100 cows that I'd bought. The cattle market had went down so far between 14 and 16. And I said, I don't think it's a unique problem, but my catalyst to change and see that there had to be a better way to do things and better ways to focus my priorities had to come from a position of necessity. What I was doing was not working. And so we started to try to find a way to have less equipment, make better use of our resources, because we're predominantly native range. So, having silage and feed wagons and all of that stuff is not a good fit for our set of resources. And I found a lot of resources online to kind of help me with that. And we sort of dove in on our genetics, changing those, on our management, everything, and night and day difference. And my wife will tell you that as well. She's been a big part of the reasons for change, and she didn't grow up in this, but she knows it's better.
Let's take a quick break and hear a word from our sponsor today, the Wineglass Ranch. Coming February 25th to Oglala Livestock, a total age dispersion of the Wineglass Ranch Easy Keepers. The majority of these are going to be 3 and 4-year-old, coming 3 and 4-year-old, single iron, home raised Wineglass Easy Keepers, developed in a intensive, non-selective rotational grazing system. They are adapted to excel in harsh environments. There will also be on offer 250 head of Angus and black whiteface heifers, again, single iron, home raised, and 150 head of red and red whiteface heifers, single iron, home raised. So quite the opportunity here coming your way February 25th at Oglala Livestock. For more information, visit wineglassranchinc.com. So can you talk to me about, well, first of all, one of the things that occurs to me is that when we feed our animals with a feed wagon, they are adapted to the feed wagon, not adapted to their environment, right? That's kind of the thing that has occurred to me over this journey for sure.
Absolutely. It's a stress event. They stand around waiting to be fed every day. And if you're 15 minutes late, they're stressed.
Yeah.
And now we either graze our cows through the winter or bale graze. We've done swath grazing a little bit too. And I'm a big proponent and advocate of that. And I tell people that your first time bale grazing, you're going to have more to adjust to than your cows. Those cows will take to it like a pig to mud. They just maintain that grazing mentality. And we run our cows for the most part on a 2-week rotation on bale grazing because we have pretty high quality hay, really. So the plane of nutrition going that long isn't as big of a concern. And it's funny, you go out there on day 12 or 13, and most of the time, they hardly even pick their heads up. They're just going about their business. Whereas when I fed cattle every single day, like I said, if you were 15 minutes late, they were all standing at the gate, impatiently waiting. And now, I could come a day late and they would still be spread out grazing. It's not perfect. I was telling you before we went on air that my cows chose to foil my plans a little bit, spoil my plans this last weekend and move themselves. There's hiccups.
Yep, for sure. Yeah, everybody. I don't know anybody who doesn't have those, I guess, but that's the way it goes. So, was there a motivation in selecting each breed? Was each breed selected for a reason intentionally in this composite?
Yep. So,
what were those traits that drew you to each of those breeds?
Angus, the gene pool that you could pick from, I guess, is huge. Everybody likes the mothering ability of Angus cows. There's a lot of them that are really good uddered. That's important. The consumer quality, whether you're gonna be grass finished or conventional situation. I don't think anybody can argue that the eating experience of Angus cattle is up there on the list. The Simmental, it was their mothering ability, and again, just the gene pool selection is pretty large. I grew up with Simmental and Angus cross cows, and for our environment, they work really well. And that was kind of our base of what we started with. So it was easy to start with those two breeds. And the Gelbvieh we included for, the fertility, age at puberty, just the maternal efficiency in general. I mentioned they raise a really high percentage of their body weight. That was kind of our main motivation with that breed. And then Herefords, they're just hardy and genetically different from the other three breeds, which is surprising from the standpoint that they're a European breed like Angus, but genetically they're not all that similar. There's a big boost in heterosis from crossing a Hereford with anything else, almost to the point of crossing Bos Indicus. They were isolated for so long that they're just genetically different.
So is the sum then, in your mind, is the sum greater, is the whole greater than the sum of the parts, I should say?
You're talking about, is there some sort of synergetic effect?
Right, yeah, like you put all these things together and somehow it's better than it would be just, if you put them together, you know what I'm saying? The whole is greater than the sum of its parts.
I think so. I think on the feeder calf side, which whether you're going to retain your calves and run them on grass or sell them right off the cow, it's valuable either way. You have breed complementarity. So you get to combine the traits of the British and the Continental and make a feeder calf that's gonna grade and yield well if it goes the traditional route. If you keep that calf and even put it into a grass finish program, more than adequately muscled, but the fleshing ability is unreal. And then you get all the benefits of heterosis for survivability, feed conversion, stuff like that. And then on the cow side, when we brought bulls in, we were extremely picky that we used older bulls that had daughters that had been proven to be easy fleshing, good uddered, stay in production, be able to calve on their own. And then on top of that, be fairly low intake. We used a lot of cattle that had been feed efficiency tested, and it certainly wasn't a priority per se over the fertility and longevity, but we thought if we're going to be fussy, we may as well try to get cattle that do a better job at converting God's forage into product that we can feed people with.
For sure. So what does the composite look like? What are we, you said the majority black-hided, but give me some of the other characteristics as far as, maybe height, weight, shape, some of those things.
They look largely like an Angus cow, a little bit more heavy muscled. On the bull side, same thing. They're solid black for the most part. We do have some white face composites that we'll bring into the herd as females or sell as bulls. The fleshing ability is really good. On our young cows, which are almost all composites, as a second or third calf female, they're weighing between 12 and 1,300 pounds in a body condition score 6 and 7. And I think that's kind of where we want them. Ideally, I think we could have a better cow from a ranch efficiency standpoint if she's 1,050 pounds. And we could probably have more desirable feeder calves if we had 1,400 pound cows, but kind of trying to hit the sweet spot where we have an efficient cow that works on the ranch, but still offers the marketing flexibility. Is even if we, you may have plans like this, or I may have plans like this, where we're going to wean our calves and hold them over and run them on grass. There's some years that works really well, particularly if you're in an elevating market. But if you're short on feed, or we're in a situation like we may experience in the next couple of years where we might be in a declining market, it might suit you better economically to send those calves right after weaning. And if you get the cows too small, I think there's the potential there to eliminate some of that flexibility. I'm not going to say the calves won't work, because there's a fit for everything, but I think it could just potentially eliminate some of that flexibility and some marketing options.
So you mentioned a couple of times marketing flexibility just now. Again, what does that mean to you, and what does this composite allow you to do from a marketing flexibility standpoint that maybe others, a purebred or a single breed animal might not allow you to do as well?
Well, I think most people that feed cattle really like feeding crossbred cattle, especially if they have a black hide. So that gives them the best of both worlds. They get the benefits of heterosis with the feed conversion and efficiency and the survivability and those types of things that are benefited from heterosis. But then they also have a calf that can go CAB and add that, $60 to $90 a head premium just for their hide color. And then, those same benefits exist if you hold that calf over and run them on grass. They're gonna thrive and be thrifty and healthy, more so than an Angus calf. And it's not to knock the Angus breed at all, but as I mentioned earlier, we needed every tool we could get when my back was against the wall. And on the female side, then, if you choose to develop your heifers or even sell them as weaned replacements, if you got a black-hided crossbred heifer, they are absolutely in demand, because it's not a secret that crossbred cows will outlast a straight bred cow by about 2 calves, what the research has shown time and time again. And we put some economics to that about a year and a half ago. I should redo it now because it might be even more, but if you can get a cow to last 2 extra calves, that's $90 per year cheaper. I got to think of a better way to word that. It's $90 less in cow depreciation per calf. So most people in my region, they don't calculate this, but their cow depreciation per calf that they produce is going to be somewhere between $180 and $240. And if you can get that cow to last 2 extra years, you take $90 off of that. Over the lifetime of a cow, that's pretty big savings.
Yeah, for sure. So what's your style of management? What are you asking these cows to do, throughout the year? Kind of how are you guys managing them?
I'll start from, a timeline from kind of right now and go through a roughly 12-month picture. I guess first I should mention that we haven't poured the cows or given any sort of parasite control since 2016. So that was one challenge we kind of threw at them right away. And right now we're asking our cows to graze standing forage and clean up some bale grazing. They did get access to a few more bales this week, but we sort of got them reconfined. So we've been blessed with nice weather, so we're able to do that right now. But throughout the winter, anytime the weather's nice enough where the snow isn't drifting in the stockpiled forage or iced in, we'll ask them to go graze. If it's drifted or iced, or we get wind chills that are 20 below or more, then we'll let those cows into bale grazing. And there's years we do that 3 months straight, or 3.5 months straight. Fortunately, the last couple haven't been that way. But almost always by the first of April, sometimes sooner, we're on stockpiled grass for the spring. There's exceptions to that as well. As you know, you have to be flexible with this style of management, but most years, no protein supplement. We did try some Rio Max tubs last year. That's another conversation. I'm not against stuff like that, but most years, no supplementation really of protein or energy on that stockpiled grass. Try to preserve some good quality stockpiled grass, but that doesn't always happen. You freeze early and don't get snow cover. It'll, lignify and oxidize. And then when we hit green up, we're moving every 2 to 4 days. I'd like to get that down to daily moves, but I've young kids and some other obligations with my time, so we're trying to balance quality of life with that. And we'll do that through about the 1st of August, and then we'll go to our second pass on about 75% of our acres. About 25% of that we'll just hold over as stockpiled grass. We'll take a really light clipping the first time. And then we'll be a little longer moves, a max of about 2 weeks. We're going to get more fences built this year that'll help us get that down even further. Water infrastructure is kind of our biggest limiting factor, and we'll do that until about the middle of November, and then we'll ask them to go either swath graze or clean up crop residue or whatever we can until this time of year again. So they're not really being babied, but having said that, we're not making them graze lignified forage all winter long through ice and not supplementing anything. We're looking after the cattle, but trying to challenge them more than our customers do. I guess that's kind of what I want. I want our management of our cows to be similar or more difficult for the cow than what our customers are.
And how has that changed over time? I mean, how has what those cows are capable of changed over time, I guess is more what I'm asking.
Sorry, misunderstood a little bit, but
yep.
The condition has improved. As I mentioned, we weigh the cows every year and take a body condition score. That's went up about 1.5 scores from when we started doing that in 2017, at the same time that our weight has dropped. And so we're ending up with a smaller, thriftier cow that's easier fleshing. And we've gone through some cows to do it. But as I mentioned, we do have some older ones that have stuck it out. And we've tried to keep as many daughters out of them as we can. Just you can't really replace that. Cows that work in your environment and have the right epigenetics to thrive in your environment, I think you need to try to replicate that as much as possible. That's probably a whole nother podcast too, if we got into the development of our bulls, trying to program the epigenetics for success. Maybe we'll have time to touch on it today, maybe we won't, but I would say the biggest things are just that the cows are easier fleshing, able to thrive on lower quality forage. And then we had quite a bit of udder cleanup that happened the first couple of years that we calved on grass and managed this way as well. And there's some of those cows too. As much as I hate to admit it, they have a far less than perfect udder, but they haven't given me a reason to can them. And so usually those heifers are not ones that are coming back into the herd, just because I don't want to replicate that udder that could be a problem. But I don't know, maybe that's the wrong way to think about it. Maybe that's a paradigm that just because there's something we look at and think that it's undesirable, we're not keeping progeny out of that cow. But we're trying to clean the udders up as best we can. We've pretty well done it. There's just 1 or 2 left that are maybe a little not so good to look at. But.
So was this process a rip the Band-Aid off thing, or was it were there kind of steps and stages to this process? How'd it go?
I wouldn't say it was a rip the Band-Aid thing off. I was very conscious of trying not to move too fast and end up with some sort of a challenge that our cash flow couldn't survive. I didn't want to have 30% of our cows open the first year and have to try to figure that out. So we basically tried to start grazing 2 more weeks out of the year every year for a few years, and have been able to pretty successfully do it. I mean, as I mentioned, it wasn't linear. 1 year we might have went 3 weeks, and the next maybe went backwards because of weather, but that was kind of our goal. And in 2017, we started calving with nature, and we made that change as a binary change. I mean, we went from calving in first part of March to May. That wasn't really gradual.
Very good. So what do you think that these, like the calves and the cows, what do you think that style of management they fit best, or what kind of end product are they usually, are you kind of thinking, hey, these are the people that these animals will fit best for? What kind of enterprises are they best suited to go into, I guess?
People that are conscious of their inputs, I would say, is the main thing, and that's going to lead towards people that want to graze more. Obviously the less equipment you're running, the better, but I would say just people that are conscious of their inputs, but knowledgeable of their economics. We've got we've got customers that do things pretty traditionally, but they've realized that they can come by pretty affordable bulls from us that hold up really well, and that's a big advantage for them. And we've got customers. I'm going to give a little shout out to a friend of mine that's a big listener of yours. His name's Denver Goodman. He's been a good customer of ours the last few years, and he's running our black composite bulls on Coriani cows, and it's working terrific for him so far. At least I think. He hasn't told me anything otherwise. So.
Very good. Yeah, shout out to Denver. So, who were the influences? Who, I guess maybe before that, what drew you to a composite? Rather than just say, hey, let's go for a more moderate framed Sim Angus cross cow, kind of where you were. What drew you to the composite in the first place?
Probably both the cow herds that I grew up in. My mom's dad, who we just lost last week, he was a good guy, but he had Charolais cross cows when I was a kid. And my dad and my other grandpa had Angus and Shorthorn cross cows with a couple other things sprinkled in until we started using some Semitole bulls on them. But my mom's dad in particular, some of those cows would have Shorthorn, Charolais, Solaire, and they'd be ugly as sin, tan, some of them tan roans with horns, and it seemed like you couldn't hardly get rid of those cows. And from a young age, I can remember thinking, like, there's something to that. And then in my dad's herd, there was a couple old cows that, I remember when the last couple of Shorthorn cows left and went to the meat shop. But, I was probably 5 at the time, but having that explained to me that they were old cows and that, they'd earned their keep. And I guess I can't really explain a sort of a defining moment that sparked that part of it, other than just, I kind of always had an admiration for sort of mutt cows that just kind of quietly did their job in the background. And then I realized you couldn't really buy that as a seed stock animal.
So create it, right?
Yeah.
That's kind of the journey you've been on, right? Is creating that animal.
Trying to.
Yep. Did you have any other influences outside the family and kind of where you grew up? Things that drew you in that direction, or you mentioned the MARC research, the Meat Animal Research Center research,
yep.
Things that kind of drew you in that direction, or maybe gave you the confidence to try and go in that direction?
As far as the composite thing, I can't really think of anything off the top of my head that led me in that direction. But in terms of our management, I remember seeing Alan Savory's TED Talk probably 10, 12 years ago. And after I saw that, I couldn't consume enough of that type of content. And that was around 2015, I think. And so I'd kind of been thinking about that type of stuff for about a year and a half when I really got my back pushed up against the wall. And so it was, I mentioned it earlier, how do we find cattle that can give us as many advantages as we can to try to lower our inputs, work with nature, be better grazers and better users of the resources that we have, rather than trying to go purchase all these resources to take care of cows. And that was just one of the things that I landed on. Right place, right time, divine intervention. I don't know what you want to call it, but I happened to see a reference to that study from MARC in Beef Magazine or something online. I wish I could tell you, but I can't.
It was probably Burke Teichert.
It could have been.
I don't know. Yeah. So you mentioned earlier programming bulls and epigenetics and some of those things. Let's just touch on that briefly here and kind of talk about what you guys are doing and why you're doing it to help.
Sure. So I got to start with talking about people for a little bit. My wife is from Dickinson, and a couple of years ago, we were headed to her folks' place for a holiday. I don't remember which one. And she flipped on a podcast, and they were talking about the Uverkalix study that was done in Sweden. And it was an epidemiology deal where they looked at church records from a church in Sweden. in the Uvercalyx district, and that's spelled with what we would call an O, but they say it Uvercalyx. And if a family's boys went through a time of famine right before they were going to go through puberty and during puberty, their children and grandchildren lived exceptionally long and healthy lives with no infertility, no records of what we now know to be autoimmune diseases or diabetes or heart disease, cancer, and they outlived the average by, I'd be lying if I made up a number, but it was significant, a number of years. And what was more interesting is that the inverse of that was also true. So if a family was experiencing a time of plenty and their boys were, I don't know, on the chubby side, I guess, to be not so politically correct, while they were about to go through puberty and during puberty, their children were kind of riddled with health issues and had earlier mortality than the average. And the whole time I was thinking about that, I was thinking about how we develop bulls in this country as a whole. You know, we wean them right before puberty, and most people pour the coals to them. And what do we need in a commercial operation? We need calves that survive first and foremost, and we need reproductive function to be firing on all cylinders. So I think there's some research being done at Mark right now to kind of test that. I've tried to get a hold of somebody a couple of times on the livestock side of things. Even on the chance that it's true, I kind of decided that we were going to start to try to replicate that with our bull development. And then it kind of made me retroactively look at things. And the daughters that we've kept out of bulls that we've developed ourselves are staying in the herd way better than the AI sires we're using, which is discouraging when you go through all the troubled AI, that's what's taking place. But, and I think it's, you know, I had a conversation with somebody that was probably one of the things God programmed into us as a means of not overusing, and I say us as, you know, animals in general, something that God programmed into animals to not overuse their resources. So if things are tough as you're developing and growing, it might be, you know, if we're going to survive, our offspring need to be good at surviving. Like, they need to have high immune function. They need to be efficient at utilizing their resources. So we can't afford to be having anybody extra, you know, perish. And the opposite was, you know, probably also could be assumed to be true, in that if it's a time of plenty, God in his infinite wisdom may have put mechanisms within us to say, we're gonna outuse our resources in this localized area. Maybe we better tone back the survival and the immune function and some things like that, so that this population stays in balance.
So how does that look then practically? What are you guys doing in practice to kind of replicate that?
So when we wean the bull calves, they go on just a very marginal grass hay. They get mineral. We're not, you know, depriving them of that, but no extra protein supplement. It's just a nice tame hay, I guess. Not any real alfalfa or anything in there. So it's adequate for maintenance, but not much growth. And they're on that for a couple months. That'll vary based on our resources in the year when we actually wean. We try to do it around Christmas time. Some years it's earlier, some years it's later. And then end of March or first part of April, we'll kick those bulls out to stockpiled grass, just like we do our replacement heifers and our cows, and really challenge them for about a month and a half until we green up. And then by about the 10th of May, you're really able to see who can function and convert poor forage, and who needs the extra feed resources. And we'll make
and by that time, these animals will be about a year old, right?
Yep. Roughly about a year old, about 10 days shy of a year old on the older end.
Sure.
Older end of our calves is 15th, 20th of May, they're born. And yeah, you can really, I mean, you can sort the wheat from the chaff, I guess, to use an older reference there. But so we'll make another cut, you know, in early summer based on that. And then there's other things that'll come about too from, you know, if we got something that's being pulled down by parasite load, which we've pretty well culled out, but if those problems do come up, you know, those will get banded and get shipped out as well. But so just trying to challenge them. And like I said, make sure that they're not getting extra feed resources thrown at them. falsely promote inferior genetics for foraging ability, I guess. I will say with full disclosure that they do get a little bit of grain when they come home their second fall. And that's partially as a tool to just make sure that everybody's quiet and tamed down, because the bulls get developed for the summertime on a place that we manage a little less intensively. They'll get moved every 3 to 5 weeks. There's not great water there, very poor fencing, but it's away from cows. So that's kind of nice. It's isolated. They don't get themselves in too much trouble. But when they come home from that, for about 45 days, they'll get 8 to 10 pounds a day of a corn, wheat midds, and distillers mixture, and it shines them up a little bit. If anybody goes and watches our videos on TV auction, they're not overly conditioned by any means. Most people would still describe them as pretty green, but by now they're back on 100% forage again. We only feed that for about 45 days. Sure. And we'll use it as a working tool as well. So we'll try to feed them in a different part of a pasture, or lead them through a gate or into a set of corrals and feed them, so they get used to following and they look for a gate when you handle them. And I just think bulls that are easy to handle are important to have around.
What about the female side? How's your heifer development? What's that look like?
Same as the bulls, but with no grain. They just join the cow herd in the fall.
Sure.
Yep. They go to stockpile grass just the same. Except we don't really cull based on foraging ability there. They just won't breed,
Right.
They're with their
when they come out of the chute open, they're done.
Yep. Exactly right.
Sure. Yep. Good. Let the bulls decide, right?
Yep. Try to give them a 42-day breed up, and anything that doesn't handle it in that amount of time is not fit to be with us. And the first couple of years we did that. I mean, we had 30 or 40% open, but now I guess the heterosis is kind of shining through, and I don't know, the genetics, epigenetics, whatever you want to attribute it to, but we're averaging around 90% breed up on those yearling heifers now with that development. So,
wow, yeah, that's cool. Okay, so kind of last question here: what is the future? What are you looking at next? What are the things that you're like, we should try this or tweak that or pay attention to this?
I think we're going to stay the course for the most part from the genetic side of things. I mentioned, using more of our own bulls, both from a genetic standpoint and the epigenetic standpoint, as we get more of those cows turned over with the composite cows, but largely stay the course. I would say the biggest changes I'm excited about are on our management, and just increasing the potential of our land. I got 3 kids at home. So ultimately, I guess I should have had you ask them this question, but they're a little young. My son is super excited about all this. He kind of wants buffalo, so I'm not sure what direction that's going to go. He also thinks he wants to raise deer. But I think we're going to incorporate virtual fencing in the next couple of years. We're going to continue to try to develop more water infrastructure. And I think try to focus on treating our customers really well and visiting as many of them as we can and learning from them, and try to be a lifelong learner. So I like to try to spend, a couple half days with customers and learn how they're running cows and different things that they're doing. And then just try to be better stewards of what we have and increase the potential of our own land. I've told a number of people this last year, but we've been fortunate to buy some land and we rent some other stuff from family that ties in. But as I look to try to, incorporate 3 kids if they're interested when we get older, I hope we're able to do it internally without having to go buy or rent more land and just make what we have better. That's not really, a piece of our genetics, but just as a manager, that's kind of the direction I want to head.
Yeah. No, you're managing wholes. Everything is connected. And so you you can't pay attention to the genetics and forget about the people or the land or anything. It's all, when you pay attention to all of it, everything gets better.
Yep.
That's one of the things I respect most about you is, and some others like you, is those people who are all in on those moderate genetics that can survive and thrive in their environment, and the land management and the people management and the economics, because a lot of times I think we get the people who are just all in on the genetics and not paying much attention to maybe the land or whatever. So I it's cool when you get it all in one package. So
Yep. And ultimately, I'm really optimistic right now about the regenerative ag movement, about beef production. We're recording this as the food pyramid got turned upside down roughly 4 or 5 days ago.
Right side up, actually, but
right
yeah.
side up. There you go. I saw earlier this summer a graph that showed that the beef consumption per capita is headed upward for the first time since the 1950s, if I'm remembering correctly. And I really want rural America to survive and thrive into the future. And I think one of the key components of that is going to be trying to get people back on the landscape.
Yep.
Instead of having these operations, and there's really good people that are managers of big operations, just like there's really good people that are developing bulls that are pig fat. I'm not trying to dog on that, but people that are well intended. But I think one of the bright spots for our country in the future is going to be getting people back on the landscape in large scale and having smaller family operations. And I think that there's management practices out there that can help facilitate that. And you can do more with less, not just from the genetic side, but you're living proof of it. There's other people I know that are living proof of it. You don't need 10,000 acres to raise your kids in this lifestyle.
Right. Yep. No doubt, for sure. So any instructions on the sale coming up here, February 6th, closing on the 8th? Any instructions or things you'd like to say about that?
Yeah, don't hold too much negative bias for my poor videos. It was pretty dark when we did that. No, jokes aside, it's an online auction on DV Auction. It's pretty straightforward. If there's a bid within 5 minutes of close, it extends 5 minutes, so it gives people the opportunity to kind of slide down if they want to. We do not live on the yard where the bulls are. That's my grandparents' old farmstead, or what's left of it. But if anybody wants to come take a look at them, they're welcome to. If you give me a call, my number's out there on social media. It's on DV. It can be found a number of places. It's in our catalog. I'd be more than happy to come meet with you and spend an hour or two looking at bulls and talking about your operation. And we try to deliver all the bulls. So even if it's out of state, I'll work with you however I can. But we don't have a website. There's some stuff about my family and our management and stuff on Facebook. It's Arrowell Ranch, and it's not going to be for everybody, but if somebody wants to check it out, I'd be more than happy to visit with you about it.
Very good. Mason, thanks for your time today.
I sure appreciate you having me on, Clay. Thank you.
Very good. I need to hit stop recording here and let these files upload, but looks like we both very good stuff there with Mason. Really appreciate his perspective and the journey that he's been on and the way he thinks about these things. And again, opportunity if you want to get your hands on some of those bulls. There'll be information in the show notes page for today about how to get a hold of them. Appreciate the responses to the survey that have been coming in. Very appreciative of that. And again, that's running through the month of January. Towards the beginning of February, we will choose some names out of the hat, and they will be sent some prizes. A few of those will get copies of Bondsman's Man Must Measure. Quite a few of them will get hats and coffee cups. One grand prize will get a vintage hat that may not be made again, although it might get made again if my oldest son has anything to say about it, because he liked those hats and he'd like to have another one. So, but in any case, there aren't any more of them after I send these out until we make more of them. So, but yeah, so please, if you're interested, if you're able to, please go take that survey. There will be a link to that in the show notes page as well, and get entered in the giveaway. If you share your email address with us as a part of that survey, you'll be entered in the giveaway, and we'll let you know if you were one of many winners. Coming up next on the Working Cows podcast, we'll be talking to Nick Costco of Create Tailwind. We'll be talking to him about how to use properly structured whole life policies to generate and have access to cash flow and generate generational wealth and some of those things. Nick is going to be one of the speakers at the Rogue Food Conference in Rapid City, February 5th through the 7th. So if you're interested in that, you can listen on Friday when that episode comes out, or just plan to be with us for the Rogue Food Conference and hear from Joel Salatin and John Moody and Shad Sullivan and Steve Campbell and Ellen Bench and Bart Carmichael and Nick Costco and some others from the Solari Institute and other speakers as well. So it's going to be quite a conference. Really looking forward to it. Hope to see many of you there. And until then, we'll see you again real soon with another episode of the Working Cows podcast.
We invite you to visit workingcows.net to subscribe to the show via iTunes or Stitcher. You'll also find detailed show notes pages, resources from our guests, and the industry leaders who have influenced them. For more ideas on putting your cows to work for you in a more profitable way, tune in next week.